What if I told you that the history you learned in school is a carefully edited version of the truth? What if the media you trust has been feeding you the same recycled stories for decades, stories designed to make you fear some people and worship others? What if your own country has been lying to you about entire continents, entire cultures, entire groups of people? I know that sounds dramatic, maybe even conspiracy theorist crazy, but stick with me for the next 10 minutes because I'm about to show you examples that will make you question everything you thought you knew. And here's the thing, this isn't about attacking anyone's country or calling anyone evil. This is about something way more important: the people living with stigmas they don't deserve, the reputations destroyed, the opportunities lost, the human cost of fake history. By the end of this video, you'll see how media shapes reality, how it's damaged real people, and most importantly, what you can do to stop spreading these lies. Let's dive in. Let me ask you something. When I say Africa, what's the first image that pops into your head? Let me guess: poverty, dirt roads, starving children, flies, war, disease. Now let me show you something. This is Nairobi, Kenya, one of the fastest growing tech hubs in the world. They call it Silicon Savannah. This is Kigali, Rwanda, cleaner than most European cities with some of the fastest internet on the continent. This is Gaborone, Botswana, a country with better infrastructure and less corruption than many so-called developed nations. But you've never seen these images on the news, have you? Here's what happened. For decades, Western media has shown you the same narrative. Africa is a charity case. Africa needs saving. Africa is where white saviors go to make a difference. They show you World Vision commercials during your favorite TV shows. They run documentaries about villages without water, but never about the African engineers building solar power grids. They interview Western aid workers, but never the African entrepreneurs creating million-dollar businesses. And I'm not saying poverty doesn't exist there, of course it does. Just like it exists in Detroit, in parts of London, in rural America. But we don't reduce entire continents to their worst neighborhoods, do we? So what's the damage? African immigrants face discrimination when applying for jobs. Employers assume they're uneducated. African students get condescending questions like, "Did you have electricity growing up?" African professionals constantly have to prove they're not like other Africans. And entire nations lose billions in investment because Western companies think there's no infrastructure, no market, no opportunity, when the exact opposite is true. Tanzania is building a massive railway system. South Africa has a stock exchange older than many in Europe. Kenya has a mobile banking system that's more advanced than most Western countries. But the media, they'd rather show you the same tired footage from 1985. Now let's talk about another group that gets destroyed by media narratives: South Asians, specifically Indians. Go watch any Hollywood movie from the last 30 years featuring an Indian character. I'll wait. Did they have a funny accent? Were they a taxi driver or a convenience store owner? Was there a joke about curry or body odor? Did they show slums in Mumbai but never the Mumbai skyline that rivals Manhattan? This is what I'm talking about. The Western media has spent decades portraying Indians and South Asians broadly as dirty, backwards, scammers, or comic relief. They show the Ganges River pollution but not the Indian Space Research Organization that puts satellites in orbit for less money than a Hollywood movie budget. They show call center scammers but never mention that India is the world's largest democracy, or that Indian CEOs run Google, Microsoft, Adobe, and IBM. And real people suffer for this. Indian kids get bullied in schools. "You smell like curry. Go back to your country." Adults face workplace discrimination. Dating apps show study after study that South Asian men are rated lowest, not because of who they are, but because of what media has taught people to think about them. Are there problems in India? Absolutely. Poverty, pollution, corruption, just like there are in every country. Are there Indian scammers? Yes, just like there are American con artists, British fraudsters, and Russian hackers. Bad people exist everywhere, good people exist everywhere. But we don't judge white people by the worst examples of white people, do we? We don't define America by its school shootings or Europe by its colonial massacres. So why do we do it to others? And speaking of white people, let's talk about that for a second because this goes both ways. The media has created this narrative that all white people are racist, that they're all privileged oppressors who can't be trusted. And you know what? That's just as damaging and just as false. I've met white people who are some of the most welcoming, kind, open-minded individuals you could ever know. People who go out of their way to learn about other cultures, to stand up against injustice, to build bridges instead of walls. But the media doesn't show you that, do they? They show you the extremists, the angry protesters, the Karens calling the cops, the politicians saying ridiculous things. And suddenly, an entire group of people, many of whom are actively fighting racism, get painted with the same brush. This is exactly what I'm talking about. The media takes the worst examples of any group and makes you believe that's the whole story. It happens to Africans, to Indians, to white people, to everyone. And regular people, good people just trying to live their lives, suffer because of stereotypes they never asked for. Now here's where it gets really dark. Media doesn't just lie about groups of people, it lies about individuals. It makes villains into heroes and heroes into villains. Think about the history you were taught. The great explorers who discovered lands where millions already lived. The founding fathers who wrote about freedom while enslaving people. The leaders praised in textbooks who committed atrocities that somehow got edited out. Meanwhile, the people who resisted, who fought back, who tried to tell the truth, they're labeled as radicals, terrorists, troublemakers. This still happens today. Whistleblowers who expose government corruption get arrested while the corrupt officials stay in power. Activists fighting for justice get smeared in the media while the systems oppressing people get defended. Why? Because whoever controls the media controls the narrative, and whoever controls the narrative controls history. And once that false history is written, it's almost impossible to undo. Entire communities carry stigmas for generations. Entire nations get labeled as enemies. Entire groups of people become acceptable targets for discrimination, violence, policy. And nowhere is this more clear than what happened in Africa itself, where bad politicians are painted as heroes while entire ethnic groups get labeled as villains. Let me tell you about the Biafra War. From 1967 to 1970, Nigeria fought a brutal civil war. The Igbo people of southeastern Nigeria declared independence as the Republic of Biafra after facing systematic persecution and massacres. What followed was devastating. A blockade, mass starvation. Between 1 and 3 million people died, many of them children. But here's what the media and the Nigerian government sold to the world. The Igbos were rebels, troublemakers, secessionists trying to tear apart a nation. They were painted as the villains of their own genocide. Meanwhile, the politicians and military leaders who orchestrated the blockade, who allowed children to starve, who committed atrocities, they were painted as heroes protecting national unity. Statues were built, streets were named after them, history books praised their leadership. And decades later, the Igbo people still carry that stigma, still face discrimination in their own country, still get passed over for opportunities, viewed with suspicion, treated as second-class citizens in a nation they helped build. The people who survived a genocide became the villains of the story. The people who committed it became the heroes. That's the power of controlling the narrative. And this pattern repeats across Africa. Corrupt leaders who steal billions, who oppress their people, who rig elections, they get international recognition. They shake hands with world leaders. They give speeches at the United Nations. Meanwhile, the activists who speak up, the journalists who investigate, the citizens who demand better, they're labeled as radicals, agitators, threats to stability. The ones actually trying to help their countries are painted as the problem, while the ones destroying their countries are painted as statesmen. This is the real damage of fake history. It's not just about facts being wrong, it's about human beings being harmed. Okay, so what do we do about it? First, investigate before you form opinions. Don't take what you see on TV or read in headlines at face value. When you hear something about a group of people, especially negative stereotypes, ask yourself, where did I learn this? Who benefits from me believing this? Google it, find sources from people actually from those communities. Read books by authors who lived it, not journalists who visited for a week. Second, recognize your biases. We all have them, I have them, you have them. They were programmed into us by the media we consumed, the education we received, the culture we grew up in. The goal isn't to be perfect, it's to be aware. When you catch yourself making an assumption about someone based on where they're from or what they look like, pause, ask yourself, is this actually true, or is this what I've been taught to believe? Third, amplify different voices. Follow content creators from different countries, read news from international sources, listen to people telling their own stories instead of having their stories told for them. The algorithm shows you what you already believe. Break out of that bubble. And finally, speak up. When your uncle shares that racist meme at Thanksgiving, say something. When your friend repeats a stereotype, correct them gently but firmly. When you see media doing this damage, call it out. You have more power than you think. Look, I know this video might make some people uncomfortable. Nobody likes being told they've been lied to. Nobody wants to think they've believed propaganda. But discomfort is where growth happens. The people suffering from these false narratives, they didn't choose this. They're just trying to live their lives, but they're carrying the weight of centuries of lies. Lies that affect where they can work, where they can live, who will love them, how safe they are. We can't change the past, but we can change how we move forward. So before you accept the next story the media feeds you, before you make another assumption about a place you've never been or people you've never met, pause. Investigate, question, listen. Because history isn't what happened, history is what we're told happened. And it's time we started telling the truth. If this video made you think differently, share it. The algorithm won't push content like this, so it's up to you. Drop a comment telling me what surprised you most. And subscribe if you want more videos challenging the narratives we've been fed. Thanks for watching. Now go question everything.